Great. Let's get going then.
Good morning.
Morning.
Good.
Okay, I think we're ready. I'm recording.
All right, let's go ahead and get the meeting started. So public comments. Reed, anything you'd like to share, or any other members anything they want to comment on for provide any public comments?
No, thanks. It's too hot for that.
Hey, thanks, Reed. All right, then let's roll right into the minutes of July 6th. Simon, would you like to pull those up?
And just before we do that, everyone knows this already, but to confirm agenda item 9 or 7 rather is not on the meeting anymore. So we're going to view that stuff again later.
Okay, and is Brian Forrest joining us today?
Yeah, he emailed me this morning to say he'd be here.
Okay.
So I guess, can everyone see that? The
Yes.
minutes rather? Okay, great.
I just have one question. Last time I lost connection with my computer, right when the wakeboard subject came up, and I just wondered, it wasn't really discussed. It was just.
Yeah, Terry, that was just a flag, I guess, to commission members that we had received some correspondence on the wakeboat petition that had been submitted, and there wasn't we did not have any discussion on it.
Okay, and were they asking for a letter of support from the Conservation Commission? No,
Nope.
Just a heads up. Okay.
Okay.
Thanks, Simon. I didn't have any comments. Did any other commission members have comments on the minutes?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
I'll
Thank
second.
you.
This is Reed.
Thank you, Laura and Reed. Any other discussion on the motion? All right. All in favor of approving the minutes from July 6th, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? And any abstentions?
I guess I abstained because I wasn't at the meeting.
Okay, thanks. Gary's abstaining. All right, meeting's passed. Thank you very much, Simon. Nice job.
Right.
So we have next up on the agenda, we have our FY 2023 work plan. So as a reminder, the town has now started fiscal year 23 as of July 1st. So Simon and Laura and I met last week, I guess it was. Summer is cruising here. Last week to just kind of do a brainstorm and data dump from Laura to me and to Simon about what was on her list of things that the commission would be working on or might work on in the coming year or years. So this is kind of this list in front of you is kind of a product of that conversation. So the broad categories are things that should not be any surprise, I don't think, to any of you. So we have the trails and Mud Pond Conservation Area, Cadmount, of course, Winooski Valley Park District, the tree warden and / arborist, which is, I think, on our agenda later today. Emerald Ash Borer. You can help me with the acronym for this one, SWHA, Significant Wildlife Habitat Area. Pull that out. Trapping policy, land use policy, and then the Glazer property on an old stage road. Master Naturalist, Vermont Master Naturalist Program. Catching me with these acronyms this morning.
I'll try and reduce the number. Planning is notoriously bad for them.
And then we have the town plan 2025 and thinking about that and updates we might make.
WCC is Williston Conservation Commission.
Thank you, Simon. And then some site walks and agritourism. And so then, Simon, I noticed you added this table, which is this table 14A here from the town plan, which is all of the different action, all the different tasks in the entire town plan with actionable tasks by the Conservation Commission highlighted in yellow. So that was super helpful. Thank you.
Okay. And just one thing, I think number 2, the Mud Pond Conservation Area Management Plan. Slight miscommunication between Melinda. I think that she has uploaded the adopted version of that. So I think that's done.
Oh, great. So we can already check off things for our 2023 work plan. Perfect.
Yeah.
Awesome.
It's always good to put things on the list that are already done. Makes you feel like you got it off to the right start.
Exactly. All right. So looking at that list, Simon, I'm trying to figure out how to fit this all on the screen here so we can see the full list. I don't know if reducing that. And it doesn't help that I'm working from Zoom online this morning. I have a new computer and haven't remembered to download Zoom yet, so I don't have all the functionality I usually do. Yeah, I guess that works. Thank you. So I guess what I was going to ask the commission members are there things on this list that you would like to encourage we work on first, and perhaps equally importantly, are there things that are not on this list that you would like for the commission to consider working on over the coming year?
I guess for one, I would love to see the Conservation Commission. I know we have a trail steward, but to kind of focus on the trails because they are in need of some repair because of the increased use.
Okay, so trail maintenance.
Yeah, trail maintenance. And I know a couple of years ago, SEI went out there and did a pretty, inclusive, a lot of, ran some numbers, and there were reports and things about what needed to be done and where. And it would be just good to act on some of those. So.
Yeah, I remember that, Terry. Thanks for bringing that up. So yeah, Simon, we do have a report from a consultant that would be a good starting point for the maintenance conversation when we get there. So perhaps at a future agenda we can circulate that report again, and folks can familiarize themselves with it. And and it might be
worth, having a quick look at the capital budget as well to find out what's in there for any significant work.
Let me find my
Yeah, and I
notes
think
here.
the report also covered likely costs, if my memory serves me, for each trail and each trail segment and improvement, broke it out.
Yep.
I think along that same line, 2 things I was thinking of related to trails. One is to try to make some connections that we've been working on for like decades. Because I think in some cases there's just kind of one link missing, or just one or two minor things that need to be done before we can make some of the connections. And also would be some way to to monitor trail use a little better so that we can justify some of the things we want to do. That's all I got.
Yeah, those are good points, especially the monitoring for current use. That's I think we did a little bit of that. Was it last summer? But certainly worth continuing that for some of our trails that are more highly used. What was I just going to say? Oh, so we have Anne back again, right, this year?
Yeah, she's working on the trails at the moment.
Great. So I guess I was thinking that'd be another good first step in the trails conversation, is just to bring Anne in for a meeting and ask her to just share her perspective on the condition of the trails around town.
Yeah.
Maybe you can share that SEI report with her so she has an idea of, you know, what they identified.
Yeah.
Yeah, one trail that Melinda told me is going to be worked on is that the Smoker Trail, the boards are going to be placed by the Vermont Youth Conservation Corps, and they're doing it for free because it's a training.
Wow. Nice.
That's nice. So that'll be this summer.
I think it is this summer. Simon,
Yeah.
do you know?
I know that
Yeah.
Melinda was ordering all the materials for them to do this.
Nice. Yeah, I guess it'd be good for to make sure Anne is aware of that too.
Yeah.
One thing I would like to do at some point is go out for a site visit to the replaced boardwalk at the Allenbrook Nature Trail, since it's easily accessible. And if we had an in-person meeting at some point, we could just walk over there while we're together. That was a big project that finished a couple months ago. And we don't often go and look at the stuff after it's done. And this is one that's very accessible. See whether we like the materials that were used at the end and things like that. That's a request of mine.
Yeah, sounds good. We met at Catamount last Thursday, which I think everyone enjoyed for the Forest Management Committee. So it's good to get out there.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good point, Reed. We could definitely do that. I've been across it a few times myself for the past month or so, and it did turn out really nicely. Okay, anything else on trails? We can get into this when we have an actual agenda item focused on trails, but another thing to consider, which is on the screen there, is that first bullet is a potential for a trails committee. That could also be like I don't know, we could figure out how, if we want to do something like that, we could figure out if it'd be a subcommittee of this group or a different framework, but that committee could help drive some of this trails work as well.
Something that jumped out at me from the list was the EAB policy update. Now that EAB has been identified in Williston, I thought this is the kind of thing that if we want to do anything about it, we should do sooner rather than later.
And that kind of ties in with what we're going to be speaking about today, the request from Brian Forrest about getting an arborist. Could tie that together. So that's quite impressive if anybody is going by Best Buy. I went and took a couple of pictures and sent it to the state, the invasive page. And it turns out two tree service folks did send a report in, but they said neither had good pictures of the D exit hole. And these trees are just riddled with those D exit holes, and they're pretty much dead. And I don't know why they're still standing. I don't know what, I guess it doesn't matter at this point. I didn't see any bugs, but they've already done the damage.
Where are I know that they're over by Best Buy, so are they like street trees?
Yeah, street trees, and they're to the south of Best Buy, so it's actually across the road, Cypress Road, I think it is, in the parking area. There's parking lots over there, and it's over near that water tower. And
Oh, okay, near Old Navy or whatever.
well, a little over towards, Best
Yeah.
Buy, and
If you're standing in front of Best Buy looking at it, they're to the right of it in this sort of side parking lot. I mean, I think like if you go out there, it's pretty obvious.
yeah, they're pretty dead.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's worth looking because, you know, if you're not seeing like a D-shaped hole in person, you know, they are
Yep.
very clear.
And this would be a good, follow-up to why, Bruce is busy. He just, he's cutting down the trees as he marks them, but, he just didn't get out there to look at those trees. And I'm sure the beetles were there for a while to do that kind of damage.
Usually it's 2-3 years before, because it starts in the upper crown and then works its way down.
Yeah. And it looks as if somebody shaved off, probably one of the tree guys shaved off a section so you could see the galleys, the S curves of the larvae. So it's like a poster child right there in Williston.
All right, so that sounds good. I agree. Emerald Dashboard has definitely been on the radar for this group for the past couple of months. So happy to put that on the top of the list. Other topics that are not on the list, other things that folks would like to consider working on first or early in the fiscal year?
Well, I just want to reiterate what I read in the notes from last time is the fact that we've got to be, or somebody with our help has to be really good at educating the public about what Catamount's going to look like after a logging operation. Just because otherwise we're going to have a bunch of people screaming at us, demanding that it not be done. So I don't know. I'm sure that Ethan has a good idea of how to do that, but I think we need to be involved in helping in that when possible.
Yeah. Thanks for bringing that up, Gary. That was a good conversation that we had with Ethan. It was interesting to learn about that study. He was I don't know if you could quite pick this up from the minutes, but he was asking us for suggestions and ideas as to how best approaches that we thought to do outreach to the community, particularly the folks that are using Catamount, about what would be happening. And so Kim was on for that call, and I know she'll be working with Ethan and the crew on this too, I think. But they definitely, yeah. So we brainstormed some ideas, and I think we're gonna keep the conversation going with Ethan. And I guess, are you involved in that research study?
Yes, yeah, Tony and I and a bunch of other people are working on it. So we've done, I don't know, this is like the 4th copy of that in the state that we've done, different areas of the state. So I know what it's like and what it'll look like, and I'd be happy to help out with trying to have some enhanced public awareness of that.
Simon, do you have those signs that Ethan, or have they been put up, or are they still in the office?
No, I've got them. I think when
Yeah.
Ethan returns from vacation, he'll be no doubt
So those-
calling him.
Yeah, those are pretty informative signs. So they were supposed to go up early July, but I guess because of the fiscal year and ordering and timing, they didn't get put up before Ethan went on vacation, but they're very explanatory signage that explains what's going to happen in 2023 with the logging operation. And I think it's just on the northern side, past the power lines. but Ethan's planning on doing a lot of public walks, like he has done in Heinsberg Town Forest. So yeah, so he's planning stages, so.
So I guess that's one for an agenda item, late summer, early fall, to get on top of that.
And Simon, were there anything, was there anything in the town plan that caught your attention that you thought we should be looking at?
No, I mean, largely it feels like you've sort of done a lot of it, and then some of the things like transfer of development rights have sort of been superseded by the form-based code, and things like that. So, I mean, I think my view is that this sort of list that we've developed, you know, I had an initial look through this list, and pretty much everything on this list relates to a town plan policy one way or the other. So I don't feel like we are not in accordance with what the town plan says we should be doing here.
Okay.
Did we, no, one other thing I saw on the list was the significant wildlife habitat assessment. And were we still waiting to hear back from Jens Hilke about kind of he was going to look over the document and make comments? Did we ever get any comments back from him?
I guess I'll check on that. I don't know if it's been sent to him. But I think what I understand is that we've done a lot of the work, and it's a question of presenting this work to the public at some point and getting this all formalized.
So one thing that I would like to talk about this year, and I'm trying to figure out if it fits into one of these categories on here. Yeah, there it is, number 13, the ranking of conservation area interests. I think that's it. This is the topic of you know, how we weigh visual assessment results versus wetland impacts for new development parcels, and just the fact that we always have, or we have the visual assessment done, and we never, and that always kind of supersedes the decisions on impacts to wetlands when we're reviewing either pre-apps or what's the next one after pre-app?
DP stage.
Thank you. Discretionary permits.
Another
Raise that
acronym for you.
Yeah, another acronym. So I guess that's just something I think I'd like to make sure that stays on the radar, and we continue to think about how we can be better informed or equally informed on wetland assessments as we're reviewing either DPs or the pre-apps, so that the visual assessment isn't necessarily overweighting or getting over influencing our decisions without being equally informed by wetlands.
Yeah, I agree, Eric. I think any way we can make it less subjective appearing, I think would be a good thing too, to somehow incorporate different pieces in with ranks and identified values and things like that. Be great.
I don't know, and I guess for my own education, it'd be helpful to know more about areas that are identified as class 3 wetlands, because I feel like that the fact that they're identified somehow, somewhere as a wetland seems like it should be important, but when we're reviewing pre-apps or discretionary permits, often the developers, like the case in point with this Essex Annex project was on the agenda but is no longer, the developers, you know, there's no real teeth, I think, that we have to enforce anything when it comes to class 3 wetlands. So the developers just more or less ignore it, as far as I can tell. So I guess I would just like to learn more about what the benefits are, and is there something is it worth exploring something in the bylaws that gives us a little bit more influence over what happens or does not happen with class 3 wetlands when they're in the way of a developer's plans for a parcel.
I agree, Eric. I would like to have that conversation. It keeps coming up for us, the timing of getting the wetlands assessments, as well as how we weight the influence of the different factors on our recommendations.
Okay.
And then looking at some of these others, like site walks on here and agritourism. So site walks, I agree. It's always great to get out and see a parcel, and we can perhaps try to do that more when we have parcels that are, or projects rather, that are perhaps a little bit harder to picture from Google Earth or whatever, or if they're just for whatever reason just more complicated. And then agritourism, taking forward with farms. I'm looking at this now with different eyes and not remembering what exactly the concept was there about taking forward with farms. Laura, can you help me out with that one?
Yeah, I think that we started the conversation about agritourism because of the work that was done in the class and that Melinda showed us. And I think the next step was to have the next class. Let's see. I can't remember now if it's actually distribute a survey and collect, get in touch with the public and or farms and get ideas about what people would like to do on their farms. I would have to look at my notes, but I don't think that's pressing, but it should be probably done this year because we wanted to take, use the next class at UVM to take it that next step.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Laura. So that one, so the next class at UVM would be, well, it's obviously, it's too late for anything to do anything with this fall semester. So I guess the next class might be the spring semester of next year.
I think that's right.
Okay.
Yeah, but I think if we want something specific done, it'd be nice to get it on Walt Pullman's mind sooner than later, because he starts planning that, this fall. So that'd be great.
Okay. So maybe like a September timeframe or something like that.
Yeah.
For this one.
I mean, I can talk to him and just tell him we've been thinking about new ideas in different areas. If we could, we'll try to get him a list of some sort.
And I think the justification to prioritize this is that it's a lot easier to prevent land from being proposed for development than it is to control what happens once it goes to be developed. So it's part of our proactive strategy to conserve natural resources. So I think that's, even though it's not, jumping up, people aren't jumping up and down saying, will you please talk about this topic? It's important.
So was it Walt Pullman's class last year strictly focused on Laura's farm, and the other class that's the class that did the survey? They were working on kind of a survey type of a project.
That's
right. They did the interviews with some rural landowners and farms.
3 different farms. That's right. I'm trying to remember. And I don't think, I don't think Laura has approached the town about uses on her farm at this point, but she had a lot of ideas presented to her. So
Yeah, would it be a good idea to invite her when we have the discussion on agritourism?
Yeah.
We could. I know Walt suggested that she has 4 or 5 farms in the area, and he suggested maybe combining those together and really making kind of a one business out of them, and have maybe a manager and things like that to move it forward. But I don't know where that is in the process.
All right, yeah, thanks. And I think, yeah, I need to get back to that report that the class published. That was a very comprehensive report. Similarly, the Vermont Master Naturalist Program, is there a time frame for that program that we should be keeping in mind for suggesting projects for that program?
Yeah, actually, thanks. I was just thinking about that. We usually start talking about projects in October. Yeah, I can start writing some down. And the thing is, because it's a 5-town master naturalist training, since it's not all focused in Williston, probably just one project of interest will be, tackled. It could, and it could be at Catamount, it could be have to do with agritourism, or it could be something else. But yeah, I'll start putting things together that projects that they usually like, that the trainees usually enjoy tackling. I'll do that by September.
Okay, so you say you'll do that by September. So it'd be good for us to discuss that when? In early September, late August?
Late September.
Late September, okay. Perfect. All right.
I assume, Simon, you're taking some notes about timing for these topics. Is that right?
Yeah. So I guess after this, I don't know how you normally do this, but I was just going to draft up another list of what's the priorities for the coming months.
Okay. That sounds great. Yeah, Melinda usually has like a long view list of here's all the things kind of in order for the year, and then start slotting them into the meetings in the upcoming months.
Yeah.
Thanks.
And for the trapping policy, that still hasn't been heard by the select board, right?
No.
No. So that's probably sometime this summer, maybe.
Yeah, I guess I don't have a good feeling for what the status of that is. I remember that we worked on a memo, I guess it was, that we sent to the town. I forget what, I can't remember if it was the select board or somebody else, but I don't recall the fate of that memo.
It would have been to planning. I don't know, Simon, if you have the specifics, but I think it would have been to planning who would propose the change to the town policies, or would it be to Eric? Maybe it was to the town manager. Simon, do you have details?
I don't have details.
I know this, it wasn't at the select board had to they had to decide on it. They were the final word.
Yeah, I think if we're talking about changing any policy that the town has, we definitely need to go to the select board. And from my understanding is the select board wanted the Conservation Commission to sort of come up with a solution. So I think the instruction was from them. And then I think but as I understand it, there's the discussion between ourselves and Public Works and about trapping. Now, how that's going to go about the details of that just need to be agreed.
Yeah, I think the way that ended was we disagreed with Bruce about the fact that he said there should be no signage that there are traps because people steal them. And we decided that that was unsafe. And I remember Melinda saying, if there's a disagreement like that, the select board probably won't do anything. So we kind of left it that we should talk to Bruce about that and come to some kind of agreement.
And there was also talk about that Bruce thought that no one should know the location of the trap. And I just thought that was dangerous in case something happened to the trapper, whether he moved out of state or he died or whatnot, and no one would know where the traps were located.
That'd probably be science check with Bruce. I'd be surprised if Bruce didn't have a record of where it was.
Yeah, I guess he probably would, but yeah. And
Well,
I just thought that the town should know as well, town manager possibly, and
Yeah, and I think, I mean, we don't need to get into that whole conversation again right now, but the other piece of it was just, the general public knowing that there were traps in an area, maybe not necessarily, which tree the trap was set against or whatever, but so that at least letting the public know that there was trapping in a particular area.
Yeah, they could
So that they
choose
could
to
be
recreate or
aware.
not recreate in that area. Yep.
All right, so we can put this one up on the menu here for the next couple of months too. It would be nice to wrap that up. That's been dragging, I feel like for quite a while now. So it'd be nice to close that loop. Check that one off the list. I feel like we're pretty close on it. All right, what else? We have, Reed Willis, you are on today. Would you be able to provide an update to us at some point in the next month or two, perhaps, on what the Winooski Valley Park District is up to? You're the town rep still, right?
Yes, I am. Yeah, we just had a meeting. Yes, I'd be glad to. Whenever is convenient. Want me to do next month?
Why don't you work with Simon and we can find a time that works for you, and when we have a decent slot on an upcoming agenda to hear from you on what the Park District has been up to, and ways that we can continue working with the Park District on various projects and programs.
Okay.
Thanks. All right. Anything else on this list that folks want to look at in the next 3 to 4 months? Simon, have you heard anything about the town plan for 2025, and are there other groups that are thinking about it?
Yeah, so I think the intention is to start working on it this fall. The guys have been a little bit consumed by the form-based code at the moment. So I think that's, hopefully they had another hearing, another meeting with the select board last night. So hopefully that's going to ease off with a decision that will be made by the select board in the next month or so. So that we can start concentrating on the town plan, because it is going to get start ramping up.
Okay. So I expect that will start to appear on our agenda this fall then as well, and we can start working on that too. It's town plan 2025, but the goal is to wrap it up. Do they have a goal for an end date yet for the process?
I think they were talking about getting it to the select board in like a draft that they can use in sort of, I think, the spring of 24, from memory.
Okay.
So they can be adopted thereafter.
Okay. Great.
I just had a quick question. Do we have any updates on the Glacier property? Stay informed.
We don't. So it is still basically where I think you guys left off in March or whenever it was. They came to see us, and they got feedback from you and the planning commission, and we have not heard from them since. It's more on there as just, if it's something that comes up, it could take a lot of your time. So I think we just need to keep it on the radar.
Sorry, just so this is the one that's across from Adams Farm Market, the Windswept Farm. Is that the property?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, and a potential specific plan proposal.
And I don't know if you saw the letter from Alex Moss, who is the daughter of Tina and Mike Moss, who own Windswept Farm. She wrote a long letter in the Observer about preserving that field. And someone, it might have been you, Terry, I can't remember who, said that Tina and Mike had been talking to, I think, various conservation, Vermont Land Trust or whoever, to see what they could do to preserve that field for hay for their horses.
Yeah, I haven't had any contact with anything around that. So it was somebody else.
So I think we should probably just leave that one there. If that's okay. Because I don't think we're clued in and we need to wait for them, the landowner, to come to us with something.
And I know the last meeting, we talked a little bit about the new current use options coming up. So that probably would be one to keep an eye on. I guess nothing will happen till the fall. No,
so I did reach out to Keith Thompson, who has returned my call, but I keep missing him. So I will get an update on when he thinks would be a good time to come in and talk to us about what the implications are and the sort of consultation that they're starting to do.
And who's that?
It's the manager of the program at the Forestry Department at Vermont. So he's sort of badged as the contact for steering the project forward.
Right. And can you tell from the map, that any of the maps that the town has, which parcels are in current use?
I think I don't know, not from the parcels that we have in the maps we have in planning. It would be some, obviously the lister knows what's in current use. On occasion, working the permits, I know that, they've asked questions about, oh, this person's building a house, that means they need to take out their land out of current use now. So they obviously have a record of what is and isn't in current use.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea, Terry, to understand the magnitude of that in Williston, like how many properties, how many acres are under current use, so that we just have an idea of how important it is.
And that kind of brings up, this is just, the local news, is that Rose Boutin is selling her 100 acres on Christmas Lane. And it is in current use at the moment. But the buyer, this is very interesting. I can't understand this. The financing company is making the new owner shut down every operation on the farm that has public access. So I thought that was very interesting. They have a berry operation. They have a, horse operation there. And this is almost, I'm afraid, is going to force the new buyer to developing that 100 acres and pulling it out of current use. So yeah, I thought that was an odd turnabout of events to, be forced to buy a piece of land and not be able to keep it in current use and develop it. So, but that's one to keep on the radar. I don't know if it would help, if they're at all interested in conserving that or not, but it's 100 acres right near Mud Pond.
Yeah, that's interesting, Terry. Thanks for sharing that.
And this all just happened like in the last week or so, and the buyer is her grandson. So, but
that contiguous with any of the currently conserved area around Mud Pond?
It's across the road. I mean,
Yeah.
there's Mud Pond has all these fingers of access from the bike trails at and so their road, their farm access road that goes to the berry patch is directly across from one of those fingers, which could be used as a trail. And I'd have to look at the map, but our land is conserved, but we do have, one person piece of land that, is 25 acres that, and that has a, vast trail on it, but, and then the Pumpkin Hill is the next. I don't know if there's any easements on Pumpkin Hill. Can't remember.
Where's Pumpkin Hill?
The Allen farm, the Brown farm, on South Road. You know that big Victorian house?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that whole, there's four houses back there. But I didn't know at some point when that was being subdivided if there was some kind of easement across that. And then that goes to Lake Iroquois. And then the Bassett property, or there's another Caboose Lane. There was some kind of a connection over there. So.
Well, it's interesting. Yeah, I was just reading on the state's current use webpage that when there's a transfer of title for a property that's in current use, then a new application has to be filed within 30 days to keep the property enrolled in the current use program. So that's interesting. Yeah, we can definitely keep that on the radar. I know Kim was pretty interested in that too.
Right, that's a pretty key piece of land for significant wildlife habitat area.
Yeah. All right, we are a little bit over time on this one. And these other things that are on this list are the other thing that's on this list that we haven't talked about at all is Catamount. And I guess a question I had about Catamount is how much are we going to drive these things for Catamount versus the Catamount town, the other committee for Catamount.
Right. So we did. So the reason I asked Simon to put that on the agenda today was because we just met with somebody from Velco, and Kim Stinson, the executive director at Catamount, had told me that Velco was wanting to go ahead and treat with herbicides the power line. And so I wasn't sure, what the past practices were. And I talked to Carl, and he said usually every 7 years or whatever. He thought that they would go and just manually cut everything, trees and whatnot. So I just thought, it would be great to have somebody from Velco come and talk. And Devin came and she talked about, their practices, and we actually went to the power line, looked at the landscape, and she explained what they would do. And just for a visual, I said, you're not going to come in here with an airplane crop duster, right? And just herbicide the whole thing, right? Just so we could get a, idea. And she was like, oh, no. They pick the trees that will be tall. So that would be maples, ash, cherry, even though it's a mass tree. But the shrubs they would not touch, that would stay, which is good for, wildlife, bird habitat and things like that. And Simon, correct me if I'm wrong, she did suggest that because we're interested in invasives, honeysuckle and buckthorn. And she did say that they could possibly treat some of those invasives while they were there. And they would really just be they would be spraying, like Ethan did spray. He had a professional person come out and spray that area on the other side of the power lines that was just filled with buckthorn, and it was a spray.
Foliar spray, yeah.
Foliar spray, right. So, we already are doing that at Catamount. And I'm hoping that it's not going to be like a forever practice. Maybe I'm silly to think that, but I'm hoping that we can get sort of a handle on it, and that it won't be, forever. And Kim said that it actually worked okay with the communication with the applicator and the signage that they needed to put up to, tell the members when they were going to be spraying and where they were spraying. So Simon, can you add to that?
No, I think that sort of covers it off. I think Devin was just saying she explained it. She was quite new to Velco, but she explained a bit about her background, and she did mentioned they'd sort of in general they have a 4-year cycle. Like Terry said, to get to the saplings before they become too tall. They do prefer the herbicide, which is, I think she described it as a glyphosate with like oil to make sure it sticks and to make sure it doesn't drift everywhere, which also means that it's sort of safe for people to walk through sort of 2 hours after they've applied it. And I think she said the benefits of that versus sort of manual remover with the Brontosaurus and hand cutting is that it gets down into the, it removes the vegetation properly rather than cutting it, which means it just grows back even more vigorously, which, as Terry said, hopefully means that they need to do it a lot less often, so they can, mow less frequently, which does, I guess, have ecological benefits. But she did mention that they have done public outreach. I think they're doing something, maybe is it Waitsfield?
Weathersfield.
Weathersfield have a forest where they're sort of, in the middle of doing public outreach on that for some herbicide that they're applying there. So they are accustomed to, doing that outreach and telling people what's going on. Important to note that this is town land. So, if we don't want them to do that, we want them to continue doing manual cutting, we can make that request. But there are benefits to having, the herbicide treatment, especially as we're sort of already doing it for the invasives. And just like to say just a couple of bits about timeline. I think they were talking about doing it next year, and I think their window is, I think, June to October is when they like to apply it, but they want to try and get everything sort of lined up budget wise by the end of this year.
And I know Kim suggested closer to October because of the camps.
Yeah.
Kids that are in camps till August, maybe September, and doing it in the latter part of September into October.
So I think that was it. She was going to reach out to Ethan when he gets back from vacation to, just discuss it with him as the, the county forester. And I think we said we report back to the Conservation Commission if you guys have any thoughts on it.
That sounds reasonable to me. I guess what I was actually asking, but thanks for the update.
We strayed onto the next agenda item. Yeah.
That's okay. Happy to check
Yeah.
off another agenda item. What I was actually asking for our work plan is, so we have on our work plan a couple bullets for invasive strategy and the Catamount Forestry Project outreach, which I guess we did talk about. But I was thinking about the invasive strategy in particular, and how much do we need to drive that versus the Catamount, the town's Catamount committee, and are they going to play a role? I don't want to supersede whatever role the Catamount actual committee has versus us.
So when we did the budget last year, I was new at all this, and so I really didn't understand from Ethan how bad the invasive situation was out on Catamount. So we basically just, and plus COVID and funding and all that kind of stuff, we just put aside $2,000 for a budget for Catamount, which in hindsight, that's like a drop in the bucket, because we can do volunteer work with folks, with the scout troop and locals, but it's very small compared to like the Japanese barberry, where you just have to do a foliar spray because there's no way to cut every single little one of those in the buckthorn. So he was suggesting that we hire that out and do a foliar spray, and that would be more in the range of like $5,000 a year just for spraying, to get that kind of under managed. You're never going to get rid of them completely, but to manage them. So we'll have to look for funding, I guess, from other sources.
Okay, and I think to do that, most funding sources are going to want to, or at least an application would be stronger if there were some sort of a management plan, invasive management plan in place, to demonstrate that we're just not just doing this willy-nilly, but there's actually a strategy here to try and knock these things back effectively and then keep them down in the long run. And so I guess that's still that I feel like I'm still asking the same question, but so would
So
that
I
be
think like-
within our purview or the Catamounts Committee purview?
I mean, I don't want to jump in on what your committee, Terry, but I think the Catamount Committee should be leading this with input from Conservation Commission. Would be my suggestion, because the Catamount Committee is responsible for advising the Select Board on this property.
And I'm pretty sure that the forest management plan does specifically, and Laura, correct me, you've been through that forest management plan probably more than I have, but especially around invasives. But I think Ethan really does target and focus on the different stands. He's got them numbered, and he has like stand number 5 is like really needs attention soon. And especially since in 2023, they're going to be doing the logging operation out there. It's going to open up pockets of sun and open up areas for the buckthorn and honeysuckle and barberry to come back. So he really wanted to focus on that area 5, stand 5. This next come after the logging event, which is going to happen in August of 2023. So we would use that $2,000 this year probably on stand 5 and target that after he's done, to make sure, you know, that we've gotten rid of the seed source. And I think we can reach out. Green Mountain Audubon Society did donate some money towards invasive removal. No, actually, I'm sorry, the EAB treatment on the ash trees up in the northern night loop. So I guess, yeah, we definitely, that's in our probably every meeting we have, we talk about invasives at the forest. So
Okay, thanks, Terry.
does that help? I'm sorry.
A little bit. So who's the chair of that committee now?
I am still.
Oh, you
so
are?
I'm going to
Okay.
do it for one more year.
All right. So Simon, perhaps we can make this a topic for the Conservation Commission to discuss with I guess, Terry, if you can put your Catamount Committee hat on at some point during one of our meetings, and if there's other folks from that committee that you want to would like to have participate in the conversation, we could talk with you about roles for the different committee, the Catamount Committee and the Conservation Commission in terms of driving how to move that invasives program forward for Catamount.
Okay, I'll talk with Ethan. We've had a little bit of a turnover. Pat Brown stepped down from the committee. And I guess last night, Hans Bueller was interviewed to take his place. And Kim Stinson will be leaving at the end of August as her role as executive director. So
yep.
A little bit of a shame, but you know, Ethan really, has a really, he knows, where all the invasives are and has a better idea of the cost, but he did throw out $5,000 per year, just as an idea.
Okay. All right, great. Thank you, Terry.
Okay, thanks.
All right. Anything else on the FY23 potential work plan topics? Okay, so that brings us to the FY22 annual report topics. So for the annual report, I understand from Simon that we are too wordy. we share too much about what we do across the year. So we've been asked to pare it down to one page, a single page, correct, Simon?
I think from what I understand we have so many boards and so many departments now that the printing costs for the hard copy town plan were getting out of hand. So I think what we talked about was trying to keep it to a single page, and if we'd like something longer and more comprehensive, we can link to that on our own webpage and in the town plan. So folk can find out more that way.
So how long was our last one?
So
10
the last,
pages.
Yeah.
well, the last one that I received, as I like in my previous role, I was in charge of getting everything together and giving it to Sarah, the clerk. I think it was 2 pages, and she asked for it to be cut down to a single page, which we did. So this time, I think we ought to have that in mind from the outset, and sort of, almost come up with a sort of an A list and a B list, and everything on the A and B lists goes in the one for our website, and then everything in just the A list goes on the printed report.
You're here.
Can we just use a smaller font and smaller margins?
I asked that last time, and everyone's got to use the same size font.
Sounds like a person that's written too many proposals.
Yeah. And I think we also,
okay.
I personally think we need to make sure we include at least one photograph in the thing that gets published in the annual report, because I think my personal view is that invites the reader to read it a lot more than a solid wall of text.
I think another advantage in this report is to get our minds focused on what we want to do for the next year too. So I'm wondering if we couldn't, have a longer outline for us and then a summary of that in the 1-page thing, just so we can kind of figure out what we're going to do too in more detail.
Yeah, so I think that's great, and we're going to do that. We were just going to run through these topics. So I took these from the previous agendas, just to provide a starting point to figure out what people want to include. So I think, probably something that needs to go on the A list is a paragraph about Carl, that I do need a volunteer to write, who can write something about what Carl contributed over his 30-odd year on the Conservation Commission. And then really it's about what else do we feel was, the things that are particularly important that we, or rather you, achieved during the FY22 financial year.
Yeah, so thanks, Simon, for taking the time to compile this list. I agree that we definitely should acknowledge Carl's contributions in the report. We did that, I guess it was just last year, maybe, for Jude, who was on the commission for a long time too, and she retired, stepped down from the commission last year. And I think that the approach that we took last year, I thought worked pretty well, where we Melinda set up a Google Doc, and the bullets that we had agreed to lay out or describe, to write in the annual report, and then we each took a bullet or two and filled them out, and then Melinda, or maybe it was Laura, I don't recall whom, went through and kind of polished it all up to make it one clean document. That worked. I think that worked well, and happy to try that again, maybe with only 1 page. It's not necessary, but if we're going to do a larger thing for the website version, then I think that would be a good approach to do, and kind of divide up the work that way. Are there particular topics in here that folks think that we should make sure that we do include, and anything on here that may not be necessary?
I think for me, the SWHA work was a big one last year.
Because we did write a letter about the wake board response, but we didn't have an opinion, we basically said, we hope that, this will be looked at, because we don't have all the information. I'd be happy to hear other people's opinion, but I think that can be on the B list.
Yeah, and I think when I say an A list and a B list, I think there's some stuff that doesn't need to go on either, because we will chew up
C
a lot of
list.
space. Like, I'd rather spend text talking about something that's I don't know how to put this. There was a significant piece of work. Is my view.
Yeah, I agree. I was actually kind of thinking the wakeboard response was a 20 minutes on one agenda, and we didn't really spend a lot of time on it. So I was kind of thinking maybe we'd leave that one off.
Agree.
And focus on some of the other things that we did spend a lot of time on. I cannot remember what we did or talked about with regards to the restricted firearms discharge area.
Dealing with an issue that was raised over on Governor Chittenden, off of Governor Chittenden.
With the coyote. The shooting of the coyote, I guess.
Oh, that's what that one was. Okay.
Yeah, and then we were asked to weigh in on the firearms discharge area and whether there was any reason to revisit it.
And we said no.
We said no. Yeah, I think that while it was an important event, was not something we spent a significant time working on. I would put that on the C list.
Okay.
Or perhaps there's one sentence that says other topics that the commission weighed in on were, firearms discharge, wakeboarding. We could just simply have a statement saying these are other topics that were addressed this year that we didn't spend a significant amount of time on.
Yep. Okay. Thanks, Reid, for the reminder there. So yeah, so significant wildlife habitat for the A list.
EAB probably for the A list. I can write something up on that if you'd like me to. Especially since it's been found in Williston, even though we didn't update the policy, we still have talked about it, and we'll continue to.
And we did identification of hazard trees at trailheads and stuff. So there's a public safety aspect.
Yep. So I can do that one.
Great. Thank you, Laura.
And for the trapping, I'm just thinking, even though there hasn't been a decision made, there was a lot of public outcry over that. And to not even mention it might, there was a petition that was put forward. And so I think that might be at least worth mentioning.
Yeah, I think that could go on Reid's list of other things that we worked on, with, one sentence, have a list.
Right.
If I'd be happy to take a stab at working at the Carl Runge contribution paragraph.
Great.
That would be great, Gary.
Yeah, thanks, Gary. I'm glad you volunteered, because I was going to volunteer you if you didn't.
What's the timeline on this? When should we have drafts done or anything? Is there?
Tomorrow would be great. No, it's one of so it's not due until what, like December, November, or something like that. But
yeah, so they
this
start
is
calling
all
for them in January, but because we're thinking back to what we did in June of 21 or July of 21, that's already a long time ago.
Yeah.
Perhaps a month to.
Yeah, that's what I was going to propose. Maybe we can visit a first draft in our first September meeting, if that agenda is not too full. I feel like we've mentioned early September a couple of times already this meeting. Okay, so other things for the A list that we really should highlight. I feel like with a picture and Carl and significant wildlife habitat area, I feel like we have room for like one or maybe two other things to fit onto one page. Is there anything else on here that folks think is worthy of the A list?
Not on the A list, but there's how we deal with hazard trees. I think could potentially be on the B list. That was kind of a shift in how we treated our recommendations around development in Williston to adapt to what seemed like a series of hazard tree removal incidents.
Okay.
Maybe that's the
sounds
B
good.
list.
Yep.
If there's space.
Yep. Well, it's a website version, so
Yeah,
unlimited space.
yeah.
And then, oh, and I missed Emerald Ash Borer for the A list as well. So I feel like we have like room for one more thing on the A list.
Well,
And go ahead, Laura.
Oh, I think the Mud Pond Conservation Management Plan update can just be one line that we updated it.
Yeah.
I'll write the line.
And then it's on the website. You can go to the website.
Yeah,
Right.
and view it. Mhm.
All right, I'm gonna put that one on the B list. No offense, Laura, but I'm also trying to think of things that might be of particular interest to
Well-
folks who'll be reading the hard copy.
Yeah, I'm thinking visually appealing wise, the Green Up Day Town Fair, that was, I assume it's gonna be covered by other groups too, Simon. So if you think, feel free to vote down if you think that it's already gonna be covered significantly.
I mean, I
I was
think
gonna
it is, but,
propose-
I
oh.
think we should probably check that to make sure everyone doesn't make the same decision.
Yeah. Mhm. And then nobody does it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna propose something that is more looking for things that are more public facing, something like the volunteer projects at Talcott and Allenbrook. Demonstrate, oh, look, we had these various projects, we had X
Yeah.
number of volunteers come out, and here's what the community did.
Also, the completion of the boardwalk that I was talking about visiting, that was completed earlier this summer and certainly deserves a photo in this year's report. A ton of people use that, so.
I agree, Reed. Yeah.
Do we have any idea whether, who they're going to dedicate the annual report to? Do you think it might be Carl, or are there other folks? Because it would be nice to have a picture of Carl somewhere.
Right.
Yeah, could you find out, Simon, if there's gonna be any?
Yeah.
Is there usually each year somebody it's dedicated to?
I think so, from looking at last year's, it normally is.
He should be in the running.
Yeah.
Right. I would think.
Well, we can certainly, or will acknowledge him in our portion of the report, and we could probably squeeze a photo of him in there too. All right, so I've got for the A list, Carl acknowledgement, significant wildlife habitat area, Emerald Ash Borer, volunteer projects, possibly the town fair and the Allenbrook Boardwalk. I think perhaps those last two can all be lumped into one paragraph perhaps, but.
Can put my name on SWHA.
Great, thank you, Reed.
I'll take a look at what we wrote last year because it spanned from last fiscal year to this fiscal year. So I got to figure out what we did when, but I'll take a look at it.
Okay.
And
then,
could that kind of include the one down further with strategies for conserving high priority parcels?
Yeah, it may morph into that a little bit because I think what we did is at the tail end of it was take stock of how that matched up with our other conservation tools.
so that leaves the NR 206 project, Fellowship of the Wheel. And I'm just reading the list. Maybe we don't include some of these, but the CSWD wetland mitigation, I feel like that's one that can be dropped off onto the C list or no list, or one half a sentence acknowledgement or something.
Yeah.
The glacier land discussion, similarly, I feel like haven't done enough, or there isn't enough to do on that yet.
We also didn't take any official action. I don't think we should even mention it.
Yeah. And we talk, firearms are on the C list. I think that, oh, then the discretionary permit reviews and pre-apps. That I feel like that is worthy of the printed copy, but perhaps just say the Conservation Commission reviewed 5 discretionary permits and 6 pre-apps or something like that, just to
Yeah.
get it in the record there.
It's always good to have a stat.
Yep.
We need a chart showing it.
Yeah.
Simon, do you know if, I know Melinda walked with Adam Morse from Fellowship to look at access at the Mud Pond Country Park from the parking lot. Do you
I don't
know?
know. Sorry, I didn't check that.
Oh, okay, just was
Yeah.
curious.
Was that for the handicap access?
Yes, they were looking at a trail that goes from the parking lot kind of along the road on the Mud Pond Conservation side until you get to the place where you can actually cross the road instead of being on the road for that distance.
I do see people just riding through the woods. They, instead of going on the road. I mean, especially if they have a dog. So.
All right. So I think that's a pretty good starting point. So Simon, can you turn that into a
Yep.
Google Doc and highlight
Yep,
priorities or what would that, the list, I mean, the A list versus B list versus,
Yep.
I don't know if it's on the C list, maybe it doesn't need to be on there, but. So we, I don't know, are there other, so Brian is joining us in 10 minutes. We're gonna lose
Yeah.
Gary in 10 minutes. Are there other things that we need to discuss over the next 10 minutes? I think I've got the agenda right. There's nothing, we're not doing the Essex Church at 8:15. So the next thing on the agenda is 8:30 with Brian Forrest, right?
Yeah. So we are 10 minutes early.
Is there any reason for the Conservation Commission to look at the 10-year recreation and parks plan for tennis courts and where they're going to be? I know that they presented that at the Green Up Day, but I haven't really taken a close look at it. Is that something that we would look at or not?
Well, I guess at some point we will be looking at it because they're going to need some sort of they're going to need a permit for it from the DRB, I think. So we are going to look at it. Guess we can always ask whether Todd wants to share those details with us. He shared them with the public, so.
All right. So Gary, we're gonna lose you before Brian logs in at 8:30. You're right. You said you had to leave at 8:30.
Yes.
Okay. So I guess I'm just curious to hear your thoughts. I can't remember if you participated in the last conversation we had when this came up about the notion of a separate position for a town arborist.
Well, I guess I support what Brian has written here. I think it should be separate. Because I think, for one thing, I think Bruce is extremely busy, and I think he doesn't, in my opinion, have the time that is necessary to put into this, nor perhaps, I can't comment on his education in this subject, but I know there are certainly other people that are more versed in this type of work and would have the time necessary to make these decisions or help guide the decisions. So I think I support what Brian wrote here.
Do you think that there is enough work to do to justify a full-time position, or?
That's a good question. Does anybody know this arborist positions in other towns? Are they? I guess in Burlington, they definitely have probably a couple of full-time people as arborists, but towns our size, do they have paid positions for this type of work? Does anybody know?
I know Melinda, I think, mentioned that at least some have volunteer arborists. but-
Yeah, I mean, another way to look at it too is we could, if let's say we had equivalent to half-time position, if we could involve other towns, maybe we could get together and have some kind of shared position. It's just a possibility.
I wonder
And
if
that's-
Richmond has someone, or Huntington.
Yeah, even South, I don't know about South Burlington. I don't know what they have, or Shelburne or other towns like that. You know, and I don't know what, once you start getting into hiring somebody, then you can have a bigger influence of what their background is and things like that, with kind of job descriptions and things, which, you know, we may be getting to a point of that, at least for a shared position.
Yeah, I think I like the idea of a shared position. I'm just having a hard time envisioning what this person would do for, you know, in a full-time role just here in Williston. Plus, you know, the town just added, well, at least the town just added a couple of new full-time staff positions in the last budget, and I think took a little bit of heat over that. So I don't know, I could see there
Yep.
might not be that the interest to add another full-time position in the upcoming budget cycle, but a shared position with one or a couple of other towns, I think that could be an easier sell. And then if it turns out that we do need a full-time position here dedicated to Williston, then there's that, we'll have that justification. I guess I'd also be interested in talking with the Regional Planning Commission as well, Chittenden County Regional Planning Commission, to find out if they've heard for a demand like this from other towns, and if there's a way that they could coordinate something like this. If it could be you know, it's something where the town Williston contributes to a position that's perhaps hosted by the RPC.
I think
I don't know.
involving Ethan Tapper is very important too, because I think a lot of the work that this person would do would be, you know, along the same line as Ethan. So any kind of advice he has on how to best do it, I think should be valued.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I don't know how this would work, but if there was, instead of the RPC, maybe the Forest Parks and Rec could hire a person who would be like an assistant to Ethan.
Yeah, that's good. I do know that Ethan's really busy. This is like one of the heaviest counties to work in. So that's worth trying to see what kind of joint appointment we could get with a couple different sources.
I know, Laura, you looked into Milton, right? And Chris Dulmer does a volunteer.
Yeah, he's a volunteer, and he works in the school district during the school year, and then he volunteers his time during the summer months. And it kind of goes along with his job, which is he's recently been treating people's ash trees. So that's what he's been doing during the summers. And he says the workload for him isn't that much. Sometimes he's sprayed a few trees. For what he does, it doesn't sound like he does a lot for the town. But I guess, Gary, I'm interested in what you think about street trees versus small places where trees are growing naturally, not really a forest, but I know I've seen something about studies where, you know, street trees, you know, you have to transport them, you have to grow them in a nursery, you have to do all this stuff. Whereas just these small lots where trees are allowed to grow kind of retain their normal function, and might really be better for urban settings, for people, economics, and for wildlife. So do you have any opinion on that?
Well, I definitely think those kind of natural places are potentially more valuable for, I mean, they're definitely probably more valuable for wildlife and as well as, but I think the street trees is an important thing. I mean, I don't know if anybody remembers off the top of their head how many street trees we have in Williston, but I'm sure it's thousands. Well, I'm not sure, but I would guess there are many of them. And so they also play an important role. You know, every little bit helps with carbon sequestration, and as well as there's a lot of data to suggest their value in shading and other ways of reducing energy use and such around houses and such. So I'm not exactly sure what your question is, Laura, but I think they're both valuable, and I think an arborist is probably could be involved in both of these things. You know, I think they definitely would be involved in street trees and advice on, and even I don't know how we would have to segregate or separate their duties. Would they be just on publicly owned land that they would be used, or like Ethan does both? He does publicly owned land, but he'll also advise people on what to do with the tree beside their house, you know, how to trim it or enhance its growth or whatever. So that would be something that would have to be worked out in what, I guess, if the town of Williston's paying for it as Williston taxpayers, we might value, you know, them helping with individual private landowners when they have questions.
I agree that if there was a position created, that it should be all the trees in Williston and not try to separate out street trees. And I think Bruce has already indicated that he's more than willing to have someone take this over. I think that he, is really just has so much, and with all the new developments, and so he's just got so much on his plate that to have somebody else take this part over.
It'd be interesting to see. I'll throw this out too. This person would have to be persuasive if they were to convince Bruce to do something that he didn't think was the right thing to do. So, I know we've been involved with that in the past, but I think that's why having a person that has, background in it and education potentially and experience would hopefully carry a lot more weight than just somebody that says, I'm interested in making trees grow better or something.
So would it be possible to start off first trying to identify towns that do have an arborist, a paid position, and looking on their website, town website, and see if they do have a, position, and then reach out to those towns and just kind of ask, what are the responsibilities and, all the details. That might be helpful.
Yeah, and even with towns, communicate with towns that don't have an arborist in the fact of are they interested in some kind of shared thing? I think that, like Eric said, that's probably a good place to start, at least, because the town's not going to fund another full-time position unless it's super important.
Yeah, not this year.
Yeah.
But here we have Emerald Ash Borer. I mean, and so when you were mentioned that you weren't sure, how many trees were in Williston, actually, somewhere on the town website, there is an incredible detailed.
Yeah, we did that. I don't know, maybe 10, 15 years ago.
Okay, so the cost of replacing a tree, and so. Sure,
we've got, I think in many cases, we've got every street tree mapped in the town and broken down by species and all that kind of thing.
Great, that's a good baseline.
Mm-hmm. But it's only going to get worse with different invasives and the fact that we're trying to push for planting a diverse group of species for street trees is going to take some effort too. So I've got to get going, but let me know how this goes with Brian. But it sounds like I definitely support what he put in here.
Yep.
Thank you, everyone. See you later.
All right. Thanks, Gary.
And Gary did answer my question, even though I wasn't sure what it was.
Even though you weren't sure what it was?
What was the question? This is Jeopardy.
Good answer.
I was really curious about how functional street trees really are. Besides, the fact that they look nice, if they really are functional at all for carbon sequestration, or if they're really just not included in what we want to do when we think about that. So that was.
Yeah, they certainly change the ground temperature, like for pedestrians and stuff. So in terms of climate adaptation, they are important for human health benefits.
Just as an example, I went into town the other day and I left my house and it was 82 or something like that. And I got into town where there's a lot of concrete and and it was 90 degrees. And that's not a big elevation.
What do they call that? They call that sort of heat bubble or whatever they call it.
Heat sink.
It's the urban heat island effect, I think, isn't it? Where the
Yeah,
concrete
island,
heats up very quickly.
yeah, that is, urban areas or areas with a lot of impervious surface, areas with without vegetative cover heat up so much faster.
Yeah. The problems Phoenix is having.
Yeah, heat islands, I think they also refer them to them urban areas that get way hotter than the surrounding area. So I feel it a lot now that I'm living in the village where there's a lot more mature trees. We can walk pretty comfortably even on a hot day and just change which streets we walk on and based on what'll be in the shade and stuff. But at our prior home in the Taft Corners area, on a hot day, it was impossible. You were just in the sun all the time. There was not enough shade cover. So it's not carbon sequestration, but it's something.
Oh, it's important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So and I have other comments, but I'll reserve them for, hopefully Brian's going to join us.
Yeah. So I'm not sure how long we want to give them to sign in.
Oh yeah, it's past 8:30, isn't it?
Yeah, but I guess from what I'm hearing anyway, is that the Conservation Commission anyways, generally speaking, in support of this concept, whether or not it's a full-time dedicated Williston position or a shared position. I feel like I've heard from several members that might be good to go with a shared position approach initially, but next steps for this conversation, I guess, for another agenda item, whether or not we get Brian Forrest or not, I think he's planted the seed, and the seed is germinated and taken root with us anyway. So I'm not sure we really need to move forward with Brian, or obviously happy to, but I don't want that to hold up our conversation.
So shall I make my comments then, Eric, now that we're past 8:30?
Yeah, go for it.
It's kind of to your point, Laura, about creating stands of trees, is that I also feel like there's an opportunity on public land, town-owned land in Williston, to look for those pocket forests that could be established, or where trees need to be planted, not just maintaining what's there, but also identifying where trees are missing, and would provide either carbon sequestration and or shade and other services to the public. So I think there's more of an emphasis for me is on the proactive thing about planning, evaluating, making sure that there's diversity among the trees in various areas, so we don't have the same kind of issues we have with the ash today. I know we have Public Works has standards for street tree planting. I know they include diversity at this point, but there's also lots of areas where historically trees were planted prior to those diversity requirements. And so we do have areas that have a lot of the same species, and there should be a plan in place to enhance that diversity over time, so that we don't just get a whole bunch of mature trees that then either through aging out or through some sort of disease or pest, we get into a crisis where we've got a whole bunch of trees that need to come down, and we don't have anything else that's been growing for a few years and getting established. So I'd really like to see plans for interplanting and increasing diversity, creating stands of trees rather than mowed areas on public land. I think all of those are, to me, are a priority. And that's in addition to the obvious, which is maintaining what's on the ground in terms of trimming and public safety, and just kind of keeping things, optimizing the trees that we already have.
That all sounds great, Reed. I guess I would, and I agree 100%. I guess I would actually suggest going a step further and looking beyond just town-owned or public-owned land, and look at some of the neighborhoods and developments in town that have open spaces that, as far as I can tell, are just mowed and not even used in any way, shape, or form. One that comes to mind for me, because I pass by it every day, is what is it, Wildflower Circle, I think, right next to Adams Farm Market. They have that huge mowed green or lawn that could easily become a pocket forest right there. And I think there's probably some of the other larger neighborhoods may have similar areas too. So there's, I think there are opportunities for that concept,
like a
pocket
public
forest concept.
outreach kind of aspect to the
Yeah.
role.
Yeah, there'd be some public outreach and definitely some education about why it might be helpful and important and useful and interesting to turn some of those mowed spaces that they're paying for lawn care maintenance into a pocket forest that could provide other benefits.
Wasn't Sustainable Williston looking for a place to plant nurseries?
Yes,
Yeah.
I was
Yep.
about to say that reminds me of the nursery thing. That's another, I don't know whether it fits with an arborist, but somebody to keep track of and tend to a tree nursery would be an important piece if we want reforestation to take place. You need trees, and trees that are not expensive. Neighborhoods aren't going to spend tens of thousands of dollars to plant trees to create a forest, but if there's a town tree nursery and they can get them for a couple $1,000s to start a forest, then now you're getting to where they might be able to get on board with those types of projects.
The other thing is, I have gone to a couple of Doug Talamay's talks, and it's not just the tree. It's not just like the fact that the oak is a keystone species that has tons of caterpillars for birds. It's when they pupate and fall off, there's no leaf litter under them. And so it doesn't matter that you have this great tree if nothing survives because there's nothing planted under it. And so like just some of the concepts of bringing a little bit more function back into green spaces when you're talking about mowed lawns, like you don't need to mow around a tree. Maybe you need like a garden around a tree, that type of a concept, which I think I mean, I can see it being a full-time job for somebody just for Williston, because I think there's a lot that could be done to turn spaces into, especially on public land, into really interesting, unique and beautiful spots. So anyway, that's just one thought.
And there's, there were programs such as the Raise the Blade and No Mow May. And so I think it's on people's radar about the environment and, how we need to pay attention and not just mow everything.
And collective action of landowners, not just municipalities. Yeah.
Right. And we do have, I took a little mini course earlier in the spring. You know, lots, you talk about diversity of trees, species of trees, and the emerald ash borer is one, but the, you know, the chestnuts are gone. There's the Dutch elm disease. Now there's the, I just get this, the Asian longhorn beetle, which pretty much does every tree. The woolly adelgid moth,
yeah.
woolly adelgid, that goes on the hemlocks. Yeah, so and the spotted lanternfly is on its way. So
Yep.
we've got
There's an
lots to worry
endless
about.
list.
Yeah, there is.
I have the same problem in my lake, in the lakes world too. It's just endless.
Right, true. So, but that's something that would kind of fall under maybe the arborist position, would be these invasives as well. So there's the full-time position. But yeah, now where would that start? Like, Simon, would you reach out, or would you want conservation members to reach out to different towns to see where they stand?
I think where things are at the moment, it would be helpful if someone could take this on. It's something that is a priority. So just as like a little update, we are at the moment hiring for my sort of previous role replacement. So hopefully we're going to have someone maybe 3 to 4 weeks, and then after a period of transitioning and helping them out,
Yeah.
I will have a lot more time to take this stuff on for you guys.
Yeah, it gets busier before it gets less busy when you're transitioning activities. Yeah.
Yeah.
Simon, Melinda was participating in the regional conservation partnership. I think that's the term, the name of the group. That's like this kind of
Champlain Valley Conservation Partnership.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
like a half a dozen different towns or something in southeastern Chittenden County and all that.
Yeah.
Are you
Yeah, so
participating in that group?
I've been to their meeting, went to the last one. We've got another one, I think next week, with the guys on that. It's more of an information sharing forum at the moment. I was actually going to ask, like, next we're doing a sort of series where people are presenting on how zoning in each town seeks to serve land. So I'm actually doing it next week for Williston, just explaining the discretionary permit process and how growth management sort of incentivizes it with regard to, you know, the ARZD and the RZD in discretionary permits. So I'll be working on that for those guys. That's something I'm doing over the next week or so. I don't know if anyone has any examples of something, you know, a particular parcel of land where they thought it worked great, or even an example where it didn't work so good. But I'll be getting into that with the guys here as well.
Yeah, I guess the first thing that comes to my mind on that is just I guess not a particular, well, maybe it is a particular example, which is this Essex Annex project, and just the kind of a lesson learned, I guess, which around the ambiguity of what we do or cannot enforce with Class 3 wetlands. You know, if there's anything in the bylaw that's not very clear on what happens with something, then we don't have any power on it, about it, or over it, and it just gets overridden by the developers.
Yeah, so my thoughts on that were that I'm not as familiar with the bylaws as perhaps Melinda was, but there is a clause in there which allows you to recommend to the DRB at pre-app stage that they do provide, you know, a Class 3 wetlands functional assessment, and then the DRB can mandate that if they feel it's necessary to provide a DP. How that shakes out in real life, you know, I think that is what's happened here. Looks like, turns out it wasn't done, and now they're doing it.
Yep. So the reason I brought up that Champlain Regional Conservation Partnership is I was thinking, well, that could be a good group to pitch this town arborist concept to as well. And if you are meeting next week, maybe you can just, you know, let them know that this is something that's been brought up by a concerned resident in Williston, and it's gained some traction in the Conservation Commission, and including the concept of perhaps sharing a position with other towns, and
Yeah.
maybe just plant that seed with them too. All right.
Simon, I was just gonna say, as far as how conservation of open space and natural resources has gone in Williston, the analysis that was done either in 2021 or 2020, when we were in those conversations about, do we need to change the policies to as far as requiring percentages of open space, and you were working on that initiative, Terry.
Right.
So that evaluation of different developments that had been done, how much open space was conserved, how much open space would likely have been conserved, versus how much would have been required under different changes to required open space, showed, I think it was just very interesting to see what space was chosen to be required to be open, and how much was chosen to be required to be open, and how strongly that correlated with wetlands and other undevelopable space that had to be protected for other reasons, not just for percentage of open space. So I found that analysis to be really interesting, and that might be something that the other towns are interested in too, if they haven't evaluated that themselves. That's what sticks out in my memory, is looking at those maps of those developments and what percentage was retained as open space and why, was really insightful.
Good suggestion.
Some of the some of the issues with the open space was they were chopped up. A little bit.
Yes,
They weren't really contiguous, so,
I
but
think that was the biggest piece. That was, for a requirement to make a significant difference, it would have to be a percentage, and that it has to be contiguous. It can't be broken into different sections.
I don't know if it ever, if it ever went back to the planning board. It was proposed originally as 50%, which I thought was way too much, and obviously it was. So, if we went back, or somebody went back with, more realistic, like 20%, 15%, 25%, something like that, that would be more, and this would be in the ARZD, right? No, RZD, for open space. That might be easier for someone developing a piece of land to deal with.
And the conflict was mainly, I think you are aware of these things, Simon, but the conflict was mainly between, if you reduce density in the RZD and we don't overall reduce demand for housing, where does that housing get built? What is the trade-off if you push housing starts out of the RZD? Where do those housing starts happen? Do they happen in other towns? Do they not happen at all? Do they happen but at a higher cost, and therefore making affordable housing in more of a pinch? So that was where the conflict seemed to land, was in the trade-offs between protecting open space in the RZD versus what are you trading off if you do that?
And it'll be interesting to see how this Taft's Corner, the what is it called? I'm blanking. the
Form-based code.
Yeah.
Form-based code goes, because now they're really focusing on a lot of the, I don't know if it's affordable housing, but the housing to go into the growth center and really build it up there, where there's all sorts of, amenities or sewer, water, even though it's out in the water is out in the the RZD, but it'll be interesting to see if that ever comes about.
All right.
Getting back to the arborist topic though, Simon, you were saying that right now you'd really like to see somebody do the outreach to other towns about what they're doing and whether they'd be interested. So is anybody who's on the call today interested in that? I'm interested, but don't have the bandwidth at the moment. Maybe later this summer, I might be able to work on that.
I mean, maybe I can ask the question in this meeting next week, and then feed back to you what was said at that.
I also know
meeting.
that
Yeah.
my father Chapin, he might be willing to do some research on this because he's been volunteering doing some arborist work in Williston anyway, so he is invested in this topic. So I will have I can commit to having a conversation with him about whether he'd be interested in doing some research on other towns and their interest in it.
Chapin strikes me as the busiest man in the entire town.
Just about.
Yeah.
And I can reach out to a few, like Richmond. I know Judy Rosowski, who's the state entomologist, and get a feel for, she might know if different towns, and Ethan would know what different towns have arborists, paid positions. So.
Okay. That sounds like a couple of good steps forward, and we can perhaps add another 15 minutes to this for this topic on our next agenda or something to hear back about what happened with those conversations. All right, so our next meeting is, we're already at the second meeting in July. Geez, so August 3rd. Okay.
Yeah.
That one, yeah, I should be here for most of that meeting. I have some work things happening. So who's our vice chair? Is it Reed? Are you a vice chair?
Probably.
I can't remember. I should know.
He is. Yeah.
It's perfect. All right. So Reed, will you be able to attend that? Because I'm pretty sure I can at least be there until 8. I'm not sure yet about 8 to 9.
Yeah, let me see here. Let me check that schedule. So that's August
3rd.
3rd.
Yep.
Yeah. August 3rd is a problem. I am going to be traveling for business for the first time in 3 years.
All right. Well, I think Simon, I'll let you know if it looks like it's going to be a problem for me. But I think at the moment I could probably make it work. At least certainly until 8 and probably until 9. And I don't know. I may have to take the meeting from my office or something. But.
Yeah.
Right.
The other thing I was curious about is, so August has 5 Wednesdays.
Yep.
If I'm not mistaken. So another thing we could consider doing is holding a meeting instead of on the 3rd, hold a meeting on the 31st of August, which would still allow us to meet 3 times in August, and we would just meet back-to-back weeks, the last week of August and the first week of September. So
yeah, well, I think normally we would just normally we meet the 1st and 3rd week of each month, right? Third Wednesday of each month.
First and third Wednesday, yeah.
Yeah, rather than every other week. So for now, let's I mean, the 31st would probably work better for me too than either the 3rd or the 17th. But I don't know, Simon, perhaps you can send out a poll to commission members and find out what availability is looking like for August, and if we are light on attendance, we can take a look at using the 31st as a backup date. I do think it does seem like we will have to meet we'll have that Essex Alliance thing for the Class 3 wetlands to discuss on the 3rd. Is that, at least that's the current plan, right, Simon?
That's the plan. I don't know. We'll find out when because I think they're going to get a continuance of the DRB next week.
Okay.
So we'll find out what date they continue to.
Okay.
Yeah, if we had an abbreviated meeting just for that topic on the 3rd, I probably could attend it. If it's going to be a full meeting, I think I'm going to be too caught up in travel and business stuff. I very
Okay.
rarely miss meetings, Simon, but that date's a problem right now.
No worries. All right. Okay, that sounds good. And I need to go too because I need to be up in North Hero by 10. So
All right.
all right. Thanks everyone. Simon,
you.
I'll follow up over email.
Yeah, great.
All right, thanks.
Thanks, Eric.
Awesome.
Thanks, Reed, for joining us.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.